Hello, hello, and welcome to my sugar-free journey. And this is where I take a look at the different nutrition kind of headlines that have come across my desk. We take a look at them together, see where everyone is headed nutritionally. I found some really good ones over the last day or two that I think that you will be interested in. This is actually an opinion piece from the USA Today. And this is by Taylor Wallace. I'm not sure who Taylor Wallace is, but it's an interesting article. So let's go through it. We should establish a National Institute of Nutrition. So he goes through, and I just want to hit the highlights here. Poor nutrition is both a leading cause of bad health and arguably the most serious threat to the U.S. public healthcare system. I could not agree with that sentence more. We are in danger of not being able to support ourselves because too big a fraction of our money is going to pay for healthcare costs. And it doesn't matter if we privatize healthcare. It doesn't matter if we have a single payer option. It doesn't matter what we do to try to fix the problem in terms of where the actual bill for our healthcare goes. In the end, too much money is going to go to pay for things like type 2 diabetes, things like cancer, things like all the obesity issues that come up. Too big a fraction of these can be fixed by just changing our diet. And so when we look at the problems, like the biggest problems that face us as a nation that we're going to have to deal with, say, in 5 years and in 10 years and 20 years, our healthcare cost is a huge one that's just kind of waiting on the horizon for us. And it's the one that's the most fixable. It's the most easily fixed if we just had a little bit more education about what it is that we're doing to cause these problems. It says over 2/3 of Americans are overweight or obese. There was an article that came out a couple weeks ago that said only 12% of Americans over the age of 40 are metabolically healthy. So what does that mean? It means everyone's fat. It means everyone's fat. And the people who aren't fat probably genetically can't get fat, but they still have all the same diseases and everything. I work with someone that is skinny as a rail, has type 2 diabetes. So obesity isn't the only thing that we need to look at, but if we can fix obesity, we can fix a lot of these other issues as well. Obesity rates have nearly tripled since the 1960s and nearly doubled since the 1980s. In the 1980s, I mean, that's only 40 years ago, and we've doubled the rate of obesity since then. There was a time when no state had an obesity rate over, I think it was 15%, that no single state had an obesity rate over 15%, and now no state has an obesity rate less than 40%. We are in trouble. The economic impact of managing diet-related chronic conditions such as heart disease and type 2 diabetes is estimated at $583 billion. So $500 billion is going to manage these diseases today. Imagine what it's going to be like in 5 years. Imagine what it's going to be like in 10 years. It's a problem. Yet only about 5% of the National Institutes of Health annual budget is allocated to nutrition research. The establishment of a National Institute of Nutrition within NIH is long overdue. The time is now to begin investing in preventing our children's future health complications. So, I agree with this idea in principle that we should invest more government money in studying nutrition. However, I also am a realist, and I know that if the National Institute of Nutrition was established today and they came out with their recommendations tomorrow, that their recommendations would be right along the lines of my plate and the same food pyramids that we've had in place since the beginning of time, it seems like. And it's those recommendations that have caused the problems. It's mostly, they want you to eat a mostly plant-based diet, which again, I've said this before and I'll say it again, a plant-based diet is healthier for you than a standard American diet, but it's not the optimal diet. It's not the diet that most people should be eating if you're looking to maximize your health. The perfect diet is not one that's full of broccoli and collard greens. It's one that's full of steak and red meat and salt and basically all the things that no government agency in the world would recommend that you eat right now. So in principle, I like the idea that we should spend more money on nutrition, but I also know in practice that if this actually happened, most of the recommendations would be close to a vegan or vegetarian type diet. They'd want you to stay away from red meat. In fact, they would probably start taxing red meat. They'd start making red meat more difficult to get to, along with pork, along with chicken. And then, after 20 years of that, we'd look back and go, wow, we put all that money into nutrition and nobody got thinner. Everybody got sicker. Everybody still got diabetes and, nobody knows what to do. And there will probably be, just like today, this underground of people who are, screaming at the top of their lungs that it's the meat. You've got to eat the meat. It's the animal-based foods. It's the animal-based products that is the answer to all of your problems. And the fewer grains, sugar, polyunsaturated fats that you have in your diet, the healthier you're going to get. So I'm not opposed to a National Institute of Nutrition, but I also recognize that if that were to happen, what they would recommend would not be good. And in fact, let's go on. The next one that we're going to look at, the Barbaric History of Sugar. This was from the New York Times Magazine, and I think this just came out yesterday. Very, very interesting. The sugar that saturates the American diet has a barbaric history as the white gold that fueled slavery. So, this was... I'm not going to read this whole thing to you, but you need to read it. It's about how sugar has, for hundreds of years, fueled, was the reason why slaves exist. Now, in my mind, when I think of the crops that slaves were growing, I think of cotton. But sugar was another big reason why we had slaves. We needed cheap labor to harvest all those sugar cane. Sugar has been linked in the United States to diabetes, obesity, and cancer. If it is killing all of us, it is killing black people faster. And this is an important point, that the sugar that's in our diet is killing our minority communities and doing damage to our minority communities at a faster rate than the white community. Over the last 30 years, the rate of Americans who are obese or overweight grew 27% among all adults to 71% from 56%, according to the Centers for Disease Control. That's a lot. With African Americans overrepresented in the national figures. During the same period, diabetes rates overall nearly tripled. Among black non-Hispanic women, they are nearly double those of white non-Hispanic women, and 1.5 times higher for black men than white men. And again, that means more minorities are getting sick. More minorities are putting on more weight. More minorities are being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. More minorities are getting cardiovascular disease. And if you deal with the African American community in any way, you see it. I mean, that they don't even call it diabetes; they call it the sugars. That may be a regional thing here, but you talk to them and getting the sugars is almost a rite of passage. It's just something that happens, and they just kind of expect it to happen, and they kind of expect to have to lose a foot to it, over time. It's a terrible way to have to live, but it's an easily fixed if you've got the right education, if you've got the right information. But going through this, this whole article kind of outlines how the sugar harvest was responsible for slavery, and there's one part in particular I wanted to read to you because I couldn't believe it as I was reading it. Let's see here. I'm going to find it. Don't worry. Okay. It's talking about Angola prison. Let me see if I can just find it. So Angola prison. I should have highlighted in some way. All right. So I'm going to do Control F. Angola. Okay. So the landscape bears witness and corroborates Whitney's version of history. Although the Coleman Jail opened in 2001 and is named for an African-American sheriff's deputy who died in the line of duty, Rogers connects it to a longer history of coerced labor, land theft, and racial control after slavery. Sugarcane grows on farms all around the jail. So we're not talking in the ancient past. We're talking today, right now, at the nearby Louisiana State Penitentiary, or Angola. Prisoners grow it. So prisoners, right now, today, are growing sugarcane. Angola is the largest maximum security prison by landmass in the nation. It opened in its current location in 1901 and took the name of one of the plantations that had occupied the land. Even today, incarcerated men harvest Angola's cane, which is turned into syrup and sold on site. Today, right now, these are incarcerated men who are being forced to grow and to harvest this sugar cane, and they're paid less than $1 a day. Of course, our 19th Amendment allows for this, that you can basically put people into slavery as long as you convict them of a crime first. So that's what's happened. These people are convicted of a crime and they're forced to do essentially slave labor. It's a terrible story, but it just goes to show that this is not something that has been relegated to the ancient past, that these are things that are happening right now today. And again, I'll put a link to that article in the show notes. You need to read the whole thing. It's really, really good. This is from Sydney. So this is from the Sydney Morning Herald. Government orders review to weigh up added sugar labels. So in Australia, they're looking for ways to add an added sugar line to their nutrition labels so that people can see the difference between naturally occurring sugar and the added sugar that has been added in the processing of the food. So there's a huge difference in the sugar. Like if you're buying crushed tomatoes or something, there's a huge difference between the sugar that naturally occurs in the tomatoes and whether or not that during the processing of it they are added sugar to the crushed tomatoes. We need to know that. These people, we need to know if we're buying something that has added sugar. And it should be obvious right there on the label. Now, in America, it is. In America, you can see that information on the label because we have the added sugar, and they're trying to add this to the food labels in Australia. And of course, as you go through the usual list of people that would oppose this increase in information to the nutrition labels, it's the same people. It's the sugar lobby. It's the National Beverage Commission. It's the same people that are opposing this are the same people that are opposing us having the information that we need to be able to have to be able to make the decisions that we need to make about our food. It's the sugar lobby. The sugar-sweetened beverage industry is lobbying against any change that would force them to display the amount of added sugar in soft drinks and wants to be able to keep displaying an energy icon that displays the number of kilojoules per serve, because that's what people think of when they're trying to figure out how many calories something is how many kilojoules something has. It doesn't even make sense, and they do that because kilojoules is a unit of energy. So it's like if you drink this, you're going to have this much energy. They don't talk about it being a calorie or something that's going to make you obese or something that's going to make your teeth rot out of your mouth. It just shows you one more way that the sugar industry has been dishonest. One more way that the sugar industry has done everything that they can do in their power to try to deceive you, to try to obfuscate the facts, and try to not let you realize how incredibly unhealthy their products are. Soda is a terrible thing to drink. Sugar is a terrible thing to put in your body, but liquid sugar is even worse because it hits your pancreas with such a ferocity, and your pancreas has to dump so much insulin into your bloodstream in such a very, very short amount of time because there's no fiber or there's nothing to slow the absorption of that sugar into your bloodstream. So in order to keep your blood sugar at on an even keel, your body has to dump tons and tons of insulin into your bloodstream to get that sugar out of your bloodstream into a cell, into a muscle, to be used for energy, something. It just can't be in your bloodstream because it causes damage to your body. And it's that spike of insulin. It's that blood sugar spike that causes the insulin spike that causes a lot of the inflammatory damage and a lot of the problems that people are struggling with, like type 2 diabetes and these long-term chronic diseases that people are struggling with. A lot of it is because not just the sugar they were eating, but of even greater importance is the sugar that we're drinking. I found this on Twitter. This is Christian Assad's Twitter. Sleep is important. I think it's very, very important that we get enough sleep that we however much sleep our body needs, about 7.5 to 8 hours seems to be the consensus across scientific communities. And this is what he found. A study of 500,000 people in 8 countries found that progressively shorter sleep was associated with a 45% increase of developing cardiovascular disease and or dying from it. That's a stunning number. The less you sleep, the higher your rate of cardiovascular disease is. A Japanese study studied 4,000 workers sleeping 6 hours in a 14-year period. So 6 hours of sleep increased the chances of having a heart attack 500% over those who were sleeping more. Those numbers should give you pause if you're not getting the right amount of sleep, because you're doing damage. You're doing damage that you can't see. You don't know the damage is there until one day you just drop dead of a heart attack. Get the right amount of sleep, okay? And finally, this has been on my desk for a couple days now. This is from Joy Kitty. And Joy, if you watch this video, please come on my podcast. I know that I haven't sent you an invite or anything, but I would love to have you on to talk about this, if nothing else. So, this was let me just read the first line to you. This weekend, thousands of American certified diabetes educators gathered at the American Association of Diabetes Educators annual conference in Houston, Texas. So this is where the dietitians go to figure out what they're going to teach people to get them, away from type 2 diabetes. One of the learning objectives of the conference was for CDEs to learn how to implement novel and innovative ways to advance chronic disease prevention and management. And one of those novel ways was through the use of a low carbohydrate diet. So this was one of the first times that I've seen a major association of dietitians teaching their dietitians about a low carb diet. It's fantastic, and you go through this, and I just want to hit some of the highlights that she points out. So this is from Dr. Painter. So Dr. Painter's first slide demonstrates using National Health and Nutrition Examination surveys how carbohydrate content of the U.S. diet increased dramatically after 1980 and continued high, while protein content and fat content, not visible on this slide, remained stable. The increase in calories during the obesity epidemic was due largely to carbohydrate intake. This is important because when you talk to somebody about what causes diabetes or causes obesity or whatever, if they don't believe in the low carb model, it always goes back to calories for them. Just eat less calories, eat less calories, eat less calories. But they never answer the question, why in the world are these people eating so many calories? What is driving people to consume more calories today than they did 50 years ago? And the answer is it's not just calories. It's a specific type of calories. It's the calories in carbohydrates. The calories in carbohydrates are less satiating, so you feel like you have to eat more. Also, the insulin spike when you eat a carbohydrate drives you so you eat a carbohydrate, your blood sugar goes up, insulin goes up, drives your blood sugar down. If it drives your blood sugar too far down, you've got low blood sugar, you need to eat something in order to get your blood sugar back up to level. And this is why these people are just on this roller coaster of this blood sugar roller coaster, because it's going up and down, up and down, up and down, because these people aren't just eating more food. They're not just eating more calories. These people, and by these people I mean Americans in general, got fat not just because they ate more calories, but because they ate a specific type of calories, because they ate carbohydrates. And I don't want to go through all of these, but a lot of it is so good. It's so good. And but I'm going to put a link to it in the show notes. I definitely want you to check it out. And so much fantastic information. Recent data indicates that 52% of the American population is either diabetic or pre-diabetic. The cost of diabetes in the U.S. is estimated to be over $320 billion annually. I mean, everyone's diabetic. Everyone's fat. Everyone's sick. And nobody understands why. And the reason why, it's not just that we're eating more food, it's that we're eating more highly processed carbohydrates. That's the devil. Okay? All right, guys, thank you for watching. Just as a quick reminder, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, but most importantly, say something in the comments. I love to hear from you guys. and hear what you have to say. And I'd love to hear from you. To me, that's the best part of doing these videos, is when I hear you guys talk back to me. All right, guys, I appreciate you watching, and we will talk to you next time I do a video. Bye-bye.